Just when you thought it couldn't possibly get any worse for the Commonwealth, they introduced their rock star accident reconstructionist, Dr. Judd Welcher.
Question: when you're engaging in these demonstrations, are you attempting to try to show exactly how Mr. O'Keefe was struck?
No. So we don't know exactly how he was.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait. Did that? I'm sorry. Was that the sound of the Commonwealth's expert accident reconstructionist just telling you that they don't know how John O'Keefe got his injuries? This is not science, okay? This is not science. This is me and you getting dressed like John O'Keefe and playing with our cars, painting the side of a taillight. That's what this is, okay? That is the definition of reasonable doubt right there. This should have ended this case right there, right now, forever. Case closed.
God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Welcome. This is the I Don't Belong Here show, and I am your host, Samantha Benigno. I am a behavioral scientist, a career psychotherapist, a sixth-year PhD candidate in clinical psychology, a master's level psychologist and counselor, and I am here breaking down the Karen Reed case. So in honor of Mr. Welcher, I thought that I would channel John O'Keefe. So I have my orange shirt on and my little hat. This way I can get close to understanding what must have been going on the night of January 29th, 2022. Maybe I could get some heels too so that I can measure close to John's height. Do you think that might help? Maybe.
So this is me. I'm actually 6 feet, half an inch tall. What you see in the upper right is the coroner's examination report for Mr. O'Keefe. He's 73 inches tall. That's 6 feet, 1 inch tall. At this time, I was 220 pounds. Mr. O'Keefe, at the time of this incident, was 216 pounds. So I took measurements of myself. I'm actually wearing the same make and size shoes
What a coincidence.
as Mr. O'Keefe, the same brand of jeans as Mr. O'Keefe.
Because that's an important detail. To be wearing the same brand of jeans as Mr. O'Keefe somehow is going to help you, sir, figure out how he was hit by a car. Awesome.
The same brand and size shirt of Mr. O'Keefe. You see the Lexus in the background. We have matched the height to the Lexus. What I'm showing here is both my height, and then keep in mind where the height of this.
What do you think Dan Wolfe would say about this little reenactment? I don't know. I don't know what you would call this disaster, but I can definitely reassure you that this is not how the science of physics in accident reconstruction is conducted.
Wing is relative to my right eye. So now I'm wearing, in addition to the same shirt and shoes, same type of sweatshirt, and actually the same kind of baseball hat. We tried to determine the exact glass from the waterfall grill. Found out they were getting different ones at different times, but I ordered my glass from the same distributor that Waterfall Grill ordered their glasses from.
Because that too is a critical detail to how John O'Keefe got those marks on his arm.
So you can see in my right hand here, I have a glass. Here's a glass. It looks similar. It's from the same location. And then in the lower right photograph, what I've done is I've rolled up my sleeve, taken the sweatshirt off, and I'm going to look at how this contact pattern lines up. So the first set of
Just want to say before you see this that yes, this is really happening.
slides, I'm simply standing next to the Lexus. We know we have a broken taillight. We know how scratches on Mr. O'Keefe's arm. I'm seeing how those may or may not relate to the height and position of the taillight.
Dr. Welcher, if you could back up one slide, I have a question for you. In the middle photograph, at the top of the Lexus, there's like a rim. What do you call that?
I call it a wind wing. I mean, it could be a wing.
Okay, thank you.
You just can't make this up. So you see what Brennan is trying to do with that little leading question that he threw in there? You see how he's trying to insinuate that somehow John's arm got those marks at the same time as it broke the taillight, and his head somehow hit this wing, even though, as you can see with your own eyes, that taillight is protruding out, right? So if we're supposed to believe that this car backed up with all this force into John, enough to spin him around the way that Mr. Aperture is about to show us or about to suggest, how would he then also hit the wing? This, you guys, I've never seen such an utter disgrace. This is not science, okay? This is not science. This is me and you, whoever you are, going out and getting dressed like John O'Keefe and playing with our cars, painting the side of a taillight. That's what this is, okay?
Okay, so I then set about to do a little bit of testing with the Lexus.
What a disgrace.
The first test you're going to see is me just walking backwards, or actually sideways, into the Lexus. What I've done is I've painted the Lexus right rear tail light with what's called grease paint. Kind of sort of like paint, but it doesn't dry. And then I have backed up sideways, side shuffled into the Lexus with my arm out to see what the damage pattern looks like.
Okay, I just want to point out that this man just fell into the Lexus, okay? The Lexus did not drive backwards into him, okay? Do you want to see that little move again? Let's see that little move again, shall we?
With my arm out to see what the damage pattern looks like.
That really happened.
Basically,
this, ladies and gentlemen, is a real scientist actually testifying in a court of law. That is what this is. This is the Commonwealth's case right here. This is their case in chief. This is their theory. This is their theory. Go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
Where someone of Mr. O'Keefe's height.
Oh, yeah. Look it. Just like Mr. O'Keefe's arm, except, oh, yeah, minus the fact that these dog bites, they hug the entire arm. Unlike Dr. Welcher's little playing with paint example, they span the entirety of his arm, not the top section. Okay? These are not superficial on the top of his arm. They are bites. Dog's jaw around the arm. Look at this guy. This is really happening.
Arm would contact the rear tail light.
If I was a juror right now, I would be so angry. I would be spitting fire. There would be tears coming out of my eyes as I tried not to exhibit any emotion, as to try not to get myself kicked off this jury, because this is such an abomination. It is an embarrassment to say that I've ever even visited the state of Massachusetts, let alone spent any time living there.
So then what you see is I've shown the photographs again. I show the paint transfer onto my arm.
Oh, yeah. It's exactly the same, right? No, it's exactly the same. Yeah. Well, yeah, if you only show the top of John's arm, then yeah, it's the same, right? It's the same. Yeah, no gaslighting here, nothing to see here. Just show us the very top of John's arm and then tell us, well, look, it's exactly the same as where the paint that I just fell into the car with. Yeah, fell into the car. Oh my God.
The yellow grease paint on my hand was to show where my hand would hit the taillight.
How does Hank Brennan have the audacity to show this in court?
And so just kind of me walking slowly sideways into it, the approximate location.
Oh, and for those of you that are waiting for Mr. Welcher to clarify how those marks would have came from a taillight that wasn't broken, oh, he doesn't tell us that. Yeah, he just tells us he doesn't know. So I guess, according to I think he's a doctor, is never going to clarify for us how that taillight was broken or how that taillight would have made those marks on John's arm. So while he is trying to pretend that that might be an area that could have made marks on John's arm simply because of John's height, there is absolutely no explanation for how they got there, just in case you were waiting.
In a second, lines up with the approximate location of the lacerations
approximate
on Mr. O'Keefe's arm.
Very loose
Dr. Welch, let me ask
approximation.
you a question. When you're engaging in these demonstrations, are you attempting to try to show exactly how Mr. O'Keefe was struck?
No. So we don't know exactly how he was.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait. Did that, I'm sorry, was that the sound of the Commonwealth's expert accident reconstructionist just telling you that they don't know how John O'Keefe got his injuries? That is the definition of reasonable doubt right there. This should have ended this case right there, right now, forever. Case closed. This is a clip that the defense should be playing during their summation in front of the jury. Look, the Commonwealth's own expert is telling you they don't know what happened.
Engaging in these demonstrations, are you attempting to try to show exactly how Mr. O'Keefe was struck?
No. So we don't know exactly how he was struck. And pedestrian impacts are extremely sensitive to exact angles. And so where exactly your foot is, whether your foot's off the ground, can have an effect on where you end up after that. We just don't have enough information in this case to determine all that information.
That's it. I'm not even, we're not going to say, that's it. Not another word. I'm not playing you another word of that garbage because that is exactly what it is. It is garbage. And right then and there, the defense should stand up and say, their own expert just told you they have no idea what happened to John. No idea. Not an easy day. Nope, not an easy day. We had that nice break. Probably a good thing. Probably good that I had a few days away from the case to relax, chill out. Went to Mystic, Connecticut, walked around by the water, relaxed, because this was a very aggravating day for me. Maybe the most aggravating day of the entire trial so far. Maybe it's the scientist in me. I have a really, really hard time with someone who is purporting themselves to be an expert, getting up in front of a jury, fancy slide presentations, numbers, dates, times. It all looks so legit and it lines up perfectly. The only problem is that it's impossible, that none of it, absolutely none of it, could possibly be true. And just to make sure that I'm not completely losing my mind, I picked up the phone, called an old friend who called their friend who owns an auto body shop, who is very familiar with infotainment systems, to help me to at least not think I was losing my mind. Now, of course, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's some big obvious detail that is just lost to me. This is so ridiculous to me that I stopped talking about it because it gets me so upset so quickly. It is such an absurd, it is so ridiculous. The argument is insane to the point of absurdity. So I no longer even allow my brain to calculate it because it is so difficult for me to imagine how any adult on earth, let alone a prosecutor, someone who is supposed to be wearing the justice hat, could possibly present this as evidence to a jury to convict a woman of murder. Because this is so difficult for me, I try not to think about it as much as possible. But of course, today, Hank Brennan forced my hand and made me have to confront this absurdity again.
You were explaining to us the time relevance of 12:23:38. And could you tell us again, remind us, what is 12:23:38 referring to?
So 12:23:38 is syncing the text stream time to real world time. So we know how long the text stream is on. We know when the vehicle was turned on. So we're adding those two together. So if you add the 12:12:36 to, for example, 11 minutes, 2.8 seconds, or when the end of the trigger is, that gives you 12:23:38. So the end of the trigger in real world time, no longer in the running clock, is now 12:23:38.
Based on the infotainment clock?
Based on the infotainment clock.
And that's from the Lexus?
From the Lexus.
Sustained.
And where's that from?
The Lexus.
Thank you. The 12:23:58 number, what's the significance of that?
So that is Mr. Keefe's cell phone data at point 154. Again, from the original data we had just at 154 and 155 and not the in-between points. So,
And at the bottom in parentheses, explain to us what that means.
sure, if you look at where the text stream math works out to be, 12:23:38.8, and compare that to 12:23:58, the difference between those two is 19.2 seconds.
The difference between which clocks?
Between what the text stream infotainment system would show compared to what point 154 on Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone is.
And based on new data, do you now have information about what the variance, the difference is between the clock on the Lexus infotainment and the clock on Mr. O'Keefe's cell phone?
Yes.
And what is that?
Objection, Your Honor.
Going to allow that.
It's, you need to advance the text stream clock 21 to 29 seconds.
For those of you that are newer to the Karen Read case and have not yet had the opportunity to meet Trooper Joseph Paul, everyone's favorite Massachusetts State Police officer, you are in for a treat today because you're going to see what the Commonwealth's last, or actually, I guess who technically really is their accident reconstructionist, because it's Trooper Paul who began this absurd theory about the key cycle 1162. Now, because he's so stupid, it's going to be really hard for you to follow what he's saying here. So I'm just going to tell you what a key cycle is, This way, you don't have to try to decode the absurd stupidity of the mind of Joseph Paul. So I'm just going to tell you that a key cycle is very simply when the car is turned on and off. That's a key cycle, right? Now, especially in these newer cars, and definitely in the Lexus 2021 SUV that Karen Reed was driving, newer cars will track every key cycle that your car has. In the entire life of your car, key cycles are either tracked literally, in other words, 1161, 1162, 1163, 1164, as in like there's a printout somewhere, or they are tracked indirectly through other modules in the car. For example, if there is a trigger event, like you slam on the brakes or an airbag deploys, then when the car's black box is red, the way that we've seen, or not so dissimilar from the presentation that we saw from Dr. Welcher today, a key cycle is simply when the car's electricity goes on. Now, we all know maybe you've had to turn the car on to roll the windows back up, or turn the car on, I don't know, to charge a battery, to charge something, charge your phone for a few minutes. When you do that, but you don't turn the engine on, that's a key cycle. However, if you do start the engine, that is also a key cycle. However, it would be referred to as an ignition cycle. But it is also, in the car's record keeping, it is also considered a key cycle. And again, in some cars, there might be an actual list somewhere that has the key cycles in order. But most of the time, the way that key cycles show up in the telematic systems are as reference points to events like an airbag deployment or a slam on the brakes. Okay. Here's the problem with the Commonwealth's argument. The problem that teeters on delusion. Okay. Particularly with these newer cars, these black box, these telematic systems are meant to be very precise because they are meant to feed information back to the manufacturers about what went wrong with a car. God forbid, all of a sudden, for example, your brakes just stop working. This way, the car can get sent back to the manufacturer. They can look at your little black box and they can find out what the hell happened, right? Okay, so these key cycles are recorded basically for that reason, and they're important for that reason. They're important to the manufacturer more than they are to us. However, each key cycle is tracked. Therefore, it is not possible for Trooper Paul, who says that he started his testing on the Lexus in his custody, okay, meaning all of the testing that he has done to this vehicle started at key cycle 1164. Working backwards from where Trooper Paul starts his testing of this vehicle at key cycle 1164, which nobody's arguing about, that's not in question. Key cycle 1163, assuming that the troopers do not drive the car anywhere that we don't know about, would have been when the car is taken off the tow truck and driven into the Sally Port. Okay. Key cycle 1162, therefore, must be when the tow truck driver confiscated Karen's car and put the Lexus onto the tow truck. Key cycle 1161 would have been when Karen's father drives her car, the Lexus, from One Meadows to her house in Mansfield. That is assuming that they didn't stop for gas or whatever, stop at a convenience store. Who knows? Maybe they did and we don't know about it. So this, however, is important information. It is also important, remember, to consider what happens just before that, before the car winds up at John's house that morning. Remember, Karen takes her car out to go looking for John. And because that video camera of her driving through town just happened to disappear, right, in the possession of Trooper Proctor, we don't know how long Karen was driving around for before she ends up at Jen McCabe's house that morning, right? We only know that she went out looking for him. And I remember it may have even been twice. There may have even been 2 rounds of going out and looking for him. The first time, and then she comes back to the house, and that's when she calls Carrie and Jen. I believe it's possible that there was a second round before those phone calls. And I can't be sure about that. I'd have to go back and double check. So if you know, let me know. But that means that we don't know how many miles Karen put on the car during that early morning driving around looking for John. Okay? This is not rocket science. It is very simple math, guys. How is it possible that Karen Reed at key cycle 1162 could have backed her car into John O'Keefe if the car was not in her possession at key cycle 1162? Okay? It's not possible. Now, I tested this theory. I called a friend, and they informed me that there are ways that there's one way, really, one way that this person was aware of, where a car might not record a key cycle. And in these newer cars, because of the fact that we're not actually turning a key anymore, but often are pushing a button, if you had some kind of a remote control, not the button push, not even like the standard key fob, but some kind of a remote control, like if you're someone who can start your car from the comfort of your home, so that you don't have to go outside in the cold. However they're doing that, it's possible that those types of starters may not record key cycles. However, I checked this, and I double checked it with the 2021 Lexus SUV classes. And it turns out that all of the 2021 Lexus record, according to the manufacturer, every single key cycle. So it doesn't matter if it's the push button kind of key, or theoretically, even the remote control kind. According to Lexus, it's going to record the key cycle if the car is on and the ignition is running. So you tell me, how is it possible that key cycle 1162 could be this trigger event that they want us to believe? You tell me how. No, really, explain it to me. Dumb it down for me, because this does not seem like it should be up for dispute. This is a very basic and very simple fact, and I cannot understand how it is that we are still having this conversation.
You did attempt to analyze the key cycles for the Lexus in order to determine placement of that vehicle. You just talked about that with Mr. Lauper, right?
Yes.
I want to be clear for the jurors, because most people have probably never heard of key cycles. A key cycle does not have any location data associated with it whatsoever, does it?
Correct.
It just shows you when a vehicle is turned on, the ignition is on, and off. That's one cycle, correct?
No.
Tell me what I've got wrong.
Key cycle, the car doesn't have to be turned on.
Say that again.
It goes from off to run. The engine doesn't have to be started to off.
Understood. So if it turns on, well, every single ignition is a key cycle. Every time the engine turns on, that's absolutely a key cycle. Once it's turned off again, right?
That gets recorded as an ignition cycle.
Right. So a key cycle can be an ignition cycle, but it doesn't have to be an ignition cycle. It also can be just turning the sort of accessory on, right?
The key cycles to turn the accessories on.
All right. But it doesn't, my question was, and where we started with this conversation is, it does not have any location data on it whatsoever.
Correct.
All right. So when you drive your car, you walk out, get in the car, turn the ignition on, start to drive, hits your location, turn it off. That's one key cycle, right?
One ignition cycle.
But and I'm going to use the word key cycles because you use the word key cycles in your report. That's what we're talking about.
I'm using that because that's how the trigger was read.
That's how what?
The triggers were read on the text stream. That's how they read them, key cycles.
By key cycles.
Yes.
I'm going to use that phrase key cycle.
Okay.
We're talking about the same thing. It's an ignition on, ignition off cycle.
It doesn't have to be on.
So you mean the engine doesn't have to be turned on?
Correct.
Right. But if you're seeing triggering events, not trying to be tricky here, you're seeing triggering events, your car's in motion, what does that tell you? The ignition's on or off?
The ignition is on.
Right. That's what I'm getting to. But it has no location data associated with whatsoever. It could be here, it could be in Wyoming. The car wouldn't know the difference. It's not going to report the difference to you, correct?
On the key cycle,
Right.
on just the key cycle. The key cycle does not give out locations.
Say that again?
The key cycle does not give a location.
Right. So your analysis is trying to go from a known key cycle that you can figure out and then work backward from there to try to figure out where the car was on a particular ignition cycle or key cycle, correct?
I didn't use the key cycle to put it back.
Say that again?
I did not use the key cycle to place the car back in its location. The key cycles were, all I got from the key cycles is that they occurred close within proximity to the time we've had the vehicle, not basically saying that this was the location based off the key cycle.
Well, let's look at Exhibit 591 with the court's permission.
Okay.
Did you testify on Friday that this is a copy of the exhibit that was put in 591? This is part of your report, correct?
Yes, it is.
And this is a chart that shows when, move to this arrow, that arrow indicates top and bottom where your testing occurred, correct?
Yes.
Okay, if we move over to the left, that is key cycle what?
1164.
Right. So you've testified, and we can turn the lights on. Your Honor, I don't mind if that stays up. We can turn the lights on. I don't think it hurts anything. You stated in your report that there were, quote, 2 triggers recorded on odometer 12629 and key cycle 1162, correct?
Yes.
These events were prior to the testing triggers on odometer readings 12665/12666 and at key cycle 1160. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So what you're saying in that report is the triggering events were at 1162, going in reverse in order. 1162 comes before 1164. They're numerical. Is that right?
Yes.
Every single key cycle just tags another number on top of it, right? There's no formula.
Correct.
After 1 comes 2, after 2 comes 3, 4, 5, 6, and then move on, right?
Yes.
So by the time you got the vehicle, there had been 1,164 key cycles on the history of that car, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you knew, and you put in your report, the triggering events that you see under 1164, those are yours. And clear that you recorded, that you talked to Mr. Lally about, were 2,
Yes.
meaning ignition cycles at least, right?
Yes.
Stated in your report, well, let me finish, and the triggers that occurred while testing was 36 miles. You just said that, right?
Yes.
And the key cycle difference was exactly 2 key cycles, right?
Yes.
1164, 1163, 1162. That's the triggering events, correct?
That's correct.
You also reiterated in your report in paragraph 23, 24, 26, and 29, and also in this exhibit in your CARS report, that the triggers occurred at key cycle 1162, right?
Yes.
You were assisted in your CARS report, I think you mentioned Trooper Zach Clark, is that right?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor assisted to a certain degree, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Larini, Carol Larini, is that right?
Yes.
Also Sergeant Sean Good of Canton PD assisted as well, correct?
Yes, in a sense.
Did they all read the report before it was finalized?
No.
Did you have any supervisor read the report before it was finalized?
Yes.
And he agreed with the assessments in the report?
Yes.
So in summary, everybody that read the report and you who authored the report believed, and it's reflected in that report, that key cycle 1162 contained the 2 triggers that you're talking about, right?
Yes.
That's the 3-point turn, I guess now a 3-point turn, right? Changing direction, and then
Yes.
the reverse at 24 miles per hour, correct?
Correct.
And you even went on and testified to that exact thing under oath in front of the state grand jury, correct?
Yes. Wait, hold on. Under the tech streams?
On the key cycles.
Not in grand jury.
Okay. You testified to it on direct examination on Friday and again this morning.
Yes, correct.
If your testing occurred at key cycle 1164, that means you turned the engine on, the ignition on to start your testing, correct?
Correct.
And that triggering event that we see up there at 1164 initiated your testing. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. So that 1164 is where that's where there's no more unknowns, in other words. Right? You know exactly where the car is, who's in the car, who turned the car on, and what the triggering events were and what they reflected, because you did it, correct?
Correct.
It's you.
Yes.
So that would be the cornerstone, basically, of your entire analysis of the key cycles.
Say again?
The cornerstone, in
Like-
other words, the one known that is immovable, it's immutable, is 1164 began your testing. Is that right?
Objection.
Is that right? I'm going to allow the question.
Yeah, that's when the car was in state custody.
All right. So starting at 1164 and counting backward, before you started your testing, you know that the SUV had to be started, the ignition had to be turned over, and it was driven to the Sally Port in Canton at 5:31 p.m. from a tow truck on January 29th, correct?
I didn't know that.
You did or did not?
Did not know that.
Okay. Assuming that the car had to be started and put on a tow truck, that would be key cycle what?
I don't know how. I can't speak to the fact that recorded a key cycle at that time.
I can't hear you.
I can't speak to the fact that we record a key cycle at that time.
Okay. If the car was turned on and driven onto a tow truck, would that be a key cycle?
I don't know because these keys record different ways, so I can't speak to how or why it did not record on there. All I can speak to is that those are the key cycles. The odometer mileage is more what I was going after on this whole thing.
Trooper Paul, you just said unequivocally, when a car is turned on and then turned off, there's a key cycle.
I said when the car without the ignition on, that's a key cycle.
Right.
That's correct.
That's what I mean, when it's turned on, when the engine turns on.
That's the definition of what it is. I can't speak to why it didn't go on, why it did not record.
Well, let's talk about the ignition cycles
Okay.
before 1164. Okay?
Okay.
Obviously, the car had to get to Canton PD because you saw it there, correct?
Correct.
Assume for purposes of my question, the car was turned on, and there's a video of it turning on, driving up onto a flatbed tow truck.
Yes.
That would be ignition cycle, I'm going to use your word, key cycle, ignition cycle, 1163, correct?
Again, ignition cycle, key cycles are two different things.
Which word do you want me to use?
If you want to talk about key cycles, key cycles. If you want to talk about ignition cycles, it's ignition cycles when the vehicle gets turned on. A key cycle does not mean to be turned on.
But every single ignition cycle includes a key cycle. You can't have an ignition cycle without a key cycle, correct?
Well, if we want to talk about it, just use the key cycles or initial cycles. I'm trying to make sure this gets out. I'm sorry. I'm trying to make sure that this gets put out the correct way.
Every ignition cycle includes a key cycle, correct?
In a sense,
By definition, it has to, right?
it doesn't have to. They record multiple different ways.
You can have an ignition cycle without a key cycle.
I don't know how it recorded, but it could happen.
Explain that. How could that possibly happen?
Because a key cycle is when it turns on, not engine running, and then turns off.
Okay, so work with me here.
Ignition cycle is when it turns on, engine running for 2 seconds, and then comes off.
Okay, so
Or the 2 seconds, if it's not on long enough, it might not record one.
okay, let's ignore the 2 seconds.
Okay.
That's not what we're doing.
Okay.
All right. Let's assume that it's an old-fashioned type of key.
Okay.
Okay? Halfway on, the electricity is on. It's like it used to be called ACC, accessories,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
That's a key cycle, correct?
For that intensive purpose, yes. This vehicle's not a key cycles, or not a
Then you
thing.
keep turning,
Okay.
and that turns the engine on, right?
It turns the engine on,
It's
correct.
an ignition cycle, right?
Yes. Well, then turns off.
Single ignition cycle necessarily includes the precursor key cycle, correct? Even though every key cycle might not include an ignition cycle. Would you agree with that?
In that scenario, yes.
Fine. Okay, with that definition, I want to talk about ignition cycles because I don't want to get confused about accessories. Just assume the engine.
Okay.
turns on, all right?
Okay.
If you started your testing at 1164, then if the engine was turned on, thereby initiating a key cycle, driving the car onto a flatbed truck, and then hauling it over to Canton PD, that would be key cycle 1163 in that hypothetical, correct?
It could be.
Okay. Then going backward from there, if the SUV was, I'm sorry, let me add one event that I just forgot. It had to get off the tow truck in Canton and be driven into the Sally Port. Did you ever see that video?
No.
Being driven in?
No.
If there was a video showing that the car was actually driven into the Sally Port, that would necessarily be a key cycle, correct?
Possibly.
Okay, so that would be key cycle 1163. My mistake, I was missing one, right?
Okay.
Before that, if the car was turned on and driven onto the flatbed to get to Canton, that would be key cycle 1162 in order, correct? We're going backward.
It's possible.
All right. Before that, if the car was started and the car was driven from One Meadows Avenue to Karen Reed's parents' home in Dighton, that would be another key cycle, 1161, correct?
They're possible.
Before that, if the SUV was started and driven by Miss Reed from the garage at John O'Keefe's house to Jennifer McCabe's house at 5:07 in the morning, that would be another key cycle, correct? 1160. Is that right?
It's possible.
And before that, if the SUV was started and driven by Miss Reed to the waterfall, from the waterfall to 34 Fairview at approximately 12:15 a.m., that would be another key cycle, 1159, right?
It's possible.
I want to be clear. The reason that these numbers skip in your diagram, they don't go directly in order, right? Every single number is in order on this left-hand column because this is only a diagram of when triggering events occur, right?
Yes.
I just don't know how they're getting away with this. I really, really don't. I would really like to know. So somebody explain it to me.
God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradle's profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.